All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about a question so fundamental, so deeply ingrained in who we are, that we almost never stop to examine the question itself. We're going to break down the anatomy of our most powerful intellectual tool, the simple question, why?
Yeah, this one little word, it's the launchpad for literally every discovery, every bit of progress, every single aha moment in human history. It looks so simple, right? But underneath it is the entire engine that drives us forward.
Because asking why, it's not a passive thing. I love how our source material puts it here. It's a deep-seated drive to interrogate reality. It's the difference between just looking at the sky and, building a telescope to demand to know what's out there. It's an active pursuit. So where does a drive like that even come from? Well, that brings us to our first part, the spark of inquiry. Before you can have any big quest for knowledge, you've got to have that initial internal flicker that gets it all started.
And it all begins right here, with curiosity. Get this definition: a restless cognitive appetite. That's not just a passing interest, is it? It's a hunger. It's an emotional need, a feeling that it's just not satisfying to look at the world and not understand how it ticks.
But, curiosity can fade. To really stick with a tough question, you need motivation. This is the fuel that keeps you going when the answers don't come easy. And what's so cool here is how it connects the intellectual why to an emotional because. We need a reason, something personal, to keep us digging. So you take that raw curiosity, you add that steady motivation, and what do you get? You get drive. And this is where the magic happens. It's the force that turns you from someone just watching from the sidelines into an active, intentional explorer on a mission. Okay, so we've got our spark, we've got our engine, but an engine without a steering wheel is just chaos, right? We need tools to guide our thinking. So let's move on to section 2, the compass for the mind. Now, this might sound like a big academic word, but the idea is absolutely vital. Epistemology is basically turning the question why back on ourselves. It's that crucial moment where we stop and ask, wait a minute, how do I actually know this is true? Are my methods any good? It keeps our search for knowledge honest. And to make sure that whole quest doesn't just fall into a messy heap, we need logic. This is a brilliant way to think about it. Logic is the grammar of inquiry. Just like grammar gives rules to language so we can understand each other, logic provides the structure that keeps our thinking clear and on track. And here's one of the most powerful logical tools out there: reasoning from first principles. It's a way to cut through all the clutter. It's a simple 3-step process. First, you challenge everything, every assumption you have. Second, you break the problem down to its absolute, undeniable truths, the bare bones facts. And finally, from that solid ground, you build your conclusion back up piece by piece. So our spark is lit, our compass is set. Now it's time to actually start walking the path. This brings us to section 3, forging the path. This is where the real work begins. This is where our raw curiosity starts getting some structure. A hypothesis is basically a why that's been put into a testable format. It takes that vague sense of wonder and turns it into a specific what if. It's the bridge that takes us from just asking a question to actually investigating it. And that investigation is a super active process. You start with analysis, taking a big, messy problem and breaking it into smaller pieces. Then comes examination, really looking closely at those pieces. This whole thing is an iterative cycle. You keep going around and around until you can finally do some root cause analysis. That's how you get past the surface level symptoms and find out what's really going on. And through this whole journey, we need a guardian at the gate to keep us honest. And that guardian is healthy skepticism. Now, this isn't about being negative or cynical. It's about having an internal voice that's always asking, but is that really true? How can we be sure? It's the conscience of our inquiry, making sure we're not just fooling ourselves. After all that hard work, the spark, the navigation, the path forging, we finally arrive at the destination. Welcome to section 4, the treasure of understanding. And this gets us to a really key difference. On the one hand, you've got speculation. That's just a guess, right? A belief with no real evidence to back it up. But the prize, the treasure we're after, is justification. That's when a belief gets transformed into real knowledge, because now it's supported by evidence and solid reasoning. And that, right there, is what true understanding feels like. It's that amazing moment of convergence when your initial curiosity, all your hard analysis, and your justified beliefs, they all just click together into a coherent whole. It's when your question and reality finally shake hands. But we can't just stop there and pat ourselves on the back. We have to validate it. This is the final critical step. It's where we test our shiny new understanding against the real world to make sure it actually holds up. It's the reality check that keeps our knowledge grounded. And here's the real punchline. The treasure we find isn't just a single static fact we can put on a shelf. It's dynamic comprehension. It's a whole new ability to see the world differently, to spot patterns and connections you never saw before. Which brings us to the most mind-bending part of all. This journey, it doesn't actually have an end. And that's what we'll cover in our final section, the never-ending horizon. Because when you get right down to it, the question why is so much more than just a tool. It's described here as an infinite recursion of consciousness seeking itself. In other words, the act of asking why is the very engine of our own growth. It's fundamental to what it means to be human. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It's not a straight line to some final answer. It's this beautiful, self-perpetuating cycle. Your curiosity leads to knowledge. That knowledge matures into wisdom. And what does wisdom do? It makes you even more hungry to ask new, better questions. And so that's where we're left. The search is endless. It's a beautiful thing. And it leaves us with only one final question that really matters. What will you ask next?